Good evening and welcome to another episode of Apolitical Guyana. My name is Kian Jabour and every Thursday at 7 o'clock I am your host here on this brand new and exciting show. So I think what I first need to do for you guys is I need to apologize for our pilot episode. All right? This was last week at 7 o'clock on Thursday and we tried to do a type of filming method that did cause a lot of technical difficulties. But again, we're new. It's a different kind of type of program here in Guyana, so we expect a little bit of teething issues. So not to worry, I think we've upgraded, we've gotten better, and much like anything we expect in life, progression. All right? So I'm going to start by answering a few questions that was asked to me during the show last week. One of the first ones being is, what does a politically incorrect Guyana mean? Where did it come from? So the team came up, we were tossing around a few ideas, and the idea of apolitical came up. And I like the idea because we are a show that hits a lot of political topics, not only just social, what's trending, but also politics is a large part of our lives here in Guyana. I like to consider Guyana actually something called a hyper-political nation. Because of our size, politics has such a large impact on our everyday life and what we do and how we carry on business, how we live, and in every aspect, political decisions affect us very drastically. So I like the idea of apolitical because apolitical means that you have no political preference. You're not interested. It's more of a disinterest in politics altogether. Where incorrect came from is it kind of is a play on words, where I'm trying to show you that in a country that's torn by two political organizations, two of our large parties being PPP and PNC APNU, the truth of the matter is that narrow path down the middle is often looked at as incorrect. You either have to choose one side or the next. Well, I like the idea of looking at things from an apolitical perspective because I myself, just a little bit on me, I come from a nature of a third party. I'm part of an organization called the New and United Guyana, which is a third party here in Guyana. And what I try to do is I try to look at every issue as objectively as possible. This whole idea of the blame game, oh, you did it wrong, no, you did it more wrong than I did, obviously is what we're trying to get away from, and more so move towards progress and accountability and transparency. And that's where I come from with using this platform now. So a lot of you may know me from the election saga in the 2020 elections debacle. And I was one of the people that really tried to stand my ground on what was morally correct and the truth. Many people, and I hear it every day, oh, how come you're bad talking the government when you fought for them? Well, the truth of the matter is, it's not that I fought for the PPP. I fought because the truth is the PPP won the 2020 election fair and square. All right? And then now the other side hits me and says, oh, you are PPP because you fought for them in the election. Well, again, that's why I'm here now, coming from a apolitical position, coming from a third party position, not necessarily apolitical, but a third party position in which I try to ensure that I look at both of these situations as objectively as I possibly can. All right. So once again, my name is Kian Jabour, and we are going to get straight into these trending topics for the week in the news here in Guyana. The first segment, I have a forum recently that was held by the government of Guyana on anti-corruption. You know, this is something that is obviously very much so welcomed here in Guyana. As we know, Guyana has been plagued, both governments, with corruption. Day in, day out, it plasters our headlines. And it's part of what I am going to try to shed some light on and looking at it from different angles and how we can combat these things. And maybe, you know, kind of seeing through a little bit of the veil that is put over how we are going to address these types of situations. So the forum was held just recently, and it was attended by quite a few prominent government officials, two of being Ms. Gail Teixeira and Mr. Chung, the head of the PSC, Private Sector Commission. He's the Private Sector Commission chairman. I'm going to use some newsroom quotes here that in which I found very interesting. So I thought it's something we should shed, a little bit of conversation on. The first one being Mr. Shearer, where she mentions the government in a push for anti-corruption focuses on connectivity as it's seen as a challenge. Let's not get mistaken here. Connectivity is our internet connection. Connectivity is our, phone lines. The truth of the matter is none of these are the reason for corruption in Guyana. So let's not get mistaken. Connectivity, and again, as this headline will lead you to believe that we have a problem fighting corruption because of connectivity. That's not the case at all. Let's understand that, as we know, the large part of why we have corruption here in Guyana is a winner-take-all system. We are caught in a political dilemma of one party winning, either PNC or PPP, winning the election and then controlling the entire government and all decisions made, not with any need to consult anyone else on any of the matters. So what we have here is a forum that is being held by the government on anti-corruption in which the issue is government corruption. It leads me back to our old adage of you can't really leave the cat to watch the milk. We all know what happens, and we know why our older folks say it. We have to be very clear on understanding what the root issue of our issues are, and understanding, more importantly, the right way of solving these. At no point in time anymore should we be asking our governments for transparency or accountability. It is something that we now as citizens need to demand. And one of the ways to do that is to get away from this two-party system. If a winner can take all and control everything, then where do we end up in asking those that we are accusing of corruption to do us a favor and be more transparent and be more accountable? Is this not something that now, have we not reached a point that we should be demanding this, that it should be a forced situation? And we ask, well, how does that come about? And we can look at our political dynamic just in Parliament by itself. No issue at all. Democratic principles dictate that majority rules. So if majority of the population decides that they want the PPP to rule, then all of us politically invested understand that that is the decision that has been made by the people. What we need to understand, though, is that there are systems in place that we can hold that government accountable and at the same time ensure that they're allowed to run the country and not hinder the progress of the country. And that is done through Parliament. When it comes to passing a budget, shouldn't they be accountable for where the money was spent in the previous budget before we pass another budget? Shouldn't we be making sure that that money, taxpayers' money, is going directly back to where it's said it's going? Because this is where corruption stems from.
Show me the money.
You hear the budget has lots of plans and everybody gets super excited. Oh, the infrastructure, the education, the health, the different social programs. And then all of a sudden, a couple of years later or a year later, you hear, oh, these things never came into fruition. So how now do we ensure that the government is doing what they're saying and promising they're going to do? And this comes from a balance in Parliament. All right? We now look at our next quote, which came from the PSC chairman, in which he states that Guyana stands to lose large on investments without stronger anti-corruption measures. Well, everyone in the country understands that. If you have legitimate organizations that want to come into Guyana and do business, but then they have to go through all of these loopholes and red tape and bureaucracy, which is riddled with corruption, then the truth of the matter is legitimate business will avoid coming here. And that's what he's alluding to. And I appreciate, if anything at all, from our, these two key speakers, which are part of the government apparatus. What I really and truly appreciate is that they've admitted that corruption does exist. We had another issue recently where the CEO of Gaisuco and one of the board members, a Mr. Tony Vera, was caught on tape, having words with each other. I think it's very important to mention that Mr. Tony Vera was on the PPP list of candidates in our last 2020 election. And then you have the CEO of Gaisuco, which is a political appointee. As a state-owned company, the government then decides who they are putting there. And Mr. Sace was, who is currently the CEO, was determined by the government apparatus. So you have two more people here within the government structure that you're hearing on video, basically looking at each other and asking which one is more corrupt, and having very hostile words, which led to the resignation of a Mr. Tony Vera, citing that Gaisuco were then riddled with corruption. And we are now back here to basically addressing corruption, but then asking those that are accused of corruption to please stop being corrupt and be more accountable. Well, we all know how this leaves us. To show another headline, to get into another headline on Gaisuco, we ended up very recently reading about a overpaid contractors at the Rose Hall estate of about $5 million, according to the Auditor General. This headline read with an undertone that manager resigns, stating that the CEO is toxic. Well, I guess we've all been here with toxic CEOs. But the truth of the matter is, if our Auditor General, which is another government apparatus, is now looking at government institutions like Gaisuco and calling them corrupt and not being managed correctly, then where exactly are we as taxpayers ending up? I have two headlines here that I think are critical to understanding why I am so adamant about the government and being in a balanced system, because we have here that are going to show two headlines of our January's budget, in which the government gave $6 billion of taxpayers' money to Gaisuco. This is a company, this is an organization that is run by the government that is supposed to be profitable. They're using our natural resources, our agriculture lands, in order to create a product and sell it. $6 billion later of taxpayers' money used to bail them out, the company is still no longer successful. Because as you see here, with our next headline, which is only up to a couple weeks ago, we see on July 22nd, 2022, the same year, they are now being given $3.4 billion more of taxpayers' money to bail them out. This is ridiculous. How exactly have we amounted to $9.4 billion taxpayers' dollars used to bail out a failing organization run by the government? Where's the accountability here? Where is the transparency? How is it for all these years? And again, this is just the very most recent budget. But as Guyanese know, this has been happening in every government consecutively year after year. They use it mainly as a political tool to control sugar workers and agriculture workers in and around those estates. And this is where we need to start looking and asking for more accountability for our money, taxpayers' money. It cannot be used to control our population the way it is. It cannot be used to be given to select groups in society in order to win their favor when they go to the ballots. This is where we are ending up here in Guyana, having a two-party system with no balance and no accountability or transparency, only when they choose to give it to us. And even then, masked in cloaked headlines like, oh, issues with corruption because of connectivity. Connectivity has nothing to do with corruption. Corruption has to do with government officials stealing taxpayers' money and misspending it and misusing it. That's all it is. All right, we are going to move on to our next segment because I'm trying to keep with a trend on our show this week where corruption seems to be rampant here in Guyana. And what I'd like to focus on for 2 seconds is maybe not speak to the Guyanese as much, but speak to something recently that hit the news in which the government has made a decision to allow foreigners to use their foreign driver's license to drive legally in Guyana for up to 3 months. Well, I love it. Or 60 days, I believe. 2 months, right? I believe. And I personally think this is a great idea. Great decision to show how welcoming Guyana is, how open we are for people to come here and be comfortable and kind of, be as efficient and effective as they possibly can. So I like the idea of allowing foreigners to come and do ease of business here in Guyana and basically, know that there's a system, there are systems that are working towards helping. I'd like to mention again that this is going to be a little bit of a PSA for those for those foreigners. So I'm going to basically run you through here basically a day in the life of being a driver in Guyana. And more importantly, I'm going to try to gear it a little bit towards you being a foreign driver here in Guyana with these new laws. So let's start with the basics. The police don't even know the old laws. All right? It is a major issue here in Guyana, something we deal with all the time. Every day drivers are stopped here, and it's often quite a long and large debate as to who is correct when it comes to the law.
I have a right to travel on this road freely without interference, unless I break the law.
So you're going to go to the car rental company, local company, you're going to rent a car. You're then going to make sure you have all of your documentation on you. You're going to you're going to ensure the car has its documents and everything is up to date, being your fitness, registration, and vehicle license. All right? Once these documents are all, and insurance, once these documents are all intact, you will then hit the road. You're going to drive maybe for a couple hours, and like all Guyanese drivers, you will inevitably be stopped by police. You're not going to know what you did wrong, and you're not necessarily going to have done anything wrong, but you're going to be pulled over. You're going to be asked to show your documents. You're going to show all the documents, everything is up to date. They're then going to ask for your driver's license. You will show them your foreign driver's license. The first question you are going to be asked is, what exactly is this? You please explain to them where you're from and show them that your driver's license is valid. Please ensure that your driver's license is up to date, and you can explain as much as you can. From that point, they're then going to ask, where is your local driver's license? This is going to be a conversation I need you to have in a very calm, cool, collected manner. All right? You're then going to say, well, here is the screenshot that I've given you. Here is the information that says I am allowed to drive for up to 60 days from the time I arrive into the country without getting a permit. They're not going to be sure what you mean. You then are then going to explain in detail that you just arrived and you're allowed to drive. Just break it down. They're then going to say, well, like any, I guess, logical person would ask, well, I don't know how long you've been here. Well, this is where you're going to take out your passport or your ticket, and you're going to show them, well, this is when I arrived. This is going to be met by a little bit more confusion. Well, I know for read passport. You're then going to show them your stamp from our customs, and it's going to have the date on it. Please enlighten them when you arrive. Make sure it's valid again. You then are going to be met with a little bit of hostility, all right? Because they are going to assume you're trying to make them look silly, but all you're really trying to do, again, in a cool, calm, collected manner, is explain to them that this is the legal process that you're following. From this point, two things are going to happen. You're either going to be taken to the police station. Don't panic. It's okay. The police stations are safe, in which you're going to speak to a senior officer and have to explain this entire thing again. Again, just a waste of time. Don't be stressed. Very safe. Or you know where we're going with this. You can gotta laugh a little something. All right. So that's going to be your process. Again, we love the fact that the country is moving in this very open direction. We think it's important for investors. We think it's important for visitors. We think it's important to boost our local economy. But again, as part of our government apparatus, the police force obviously is a large part of what needs a lot of work. I mean, we're going to end up in a lot more technical circumstances here unless we really start to focus on the development programs of ensuring our police are better trained, are better equipped, are more educated, those kind of things. Because, and even more so, just on a very simple, more basic level, are better paid, are taken care of better. Because we can't really ask people to do a job when they feel like they're being neglected. All right? I did a small survey a little while back in which I tried to break down as much as possible what it would cost to live a comfortable life in Guyana. A life that I believe all Guyanese are entitled to. A life that not necessarily everyone lives, but everyone should be living. And I broke down the word comfortable as detailed as I could. What I mean by a comfortable living is a life in which you can have a house or a mortgage, a mortgage or a rent. You can have all of your utility bills paid. You can have a car. So you have your car payments and gas. You have your internet in your homes, as it's a necessary part of life in this day and age. You have one child, meaning one dependent, in public school. You have 10% for your savings and at least 10% for spending money. I thought these were a good initial beginning of understanding where our basic expenses come from. I began to do a little bit of research in breaking each one of those areas down categorically and seeing where our money is being spent on a daily basis and then adding that collectively and coming up with a figure. It takes the average Guyanese between 300,000 Guyana dollars and 400,000 Guyana dollars to have all of their basic necessities met for a comfortable life. Yes, you can live in Guyana for cheaper than that. But the truth of the matter is, should any Guyanese be put in a position to not have those basic fundamental rights in this day and age, in a country that is on the verge of the highest GDP growth in the world? So the truth of the matter is, where are we when our and the truth of the matter is, are we not judged by our weakest? Is that not how a country's strength is brought into light? Is that not how we assess and judge each other? If we can't afford those basic necessities for the poorest of people in our economic situation, then really and truly are we not doing an injustice to everyone? Now, I want you to think for a second of how many Guyanese are even paid half of that. Half of that money, right? 100, let's say at the lowest point, 150,000 Guyana dollars. We can talk about our public servants right now, the backbone of our country, the government being the largest employer in this country, can't even pay their own staff a respectable wage. So where again now are we coming in trying to combat this cost of living? How exactly are we ending up in a position that we are paying almost 1,000 Guyana dollars for 1 pound of tomatoes that are locally produced? How have we gotten to this point of such a drastic increase in prices? You know, I've looked at quite a few programs, I've read quite a few articles, and I've listened to quite a few people speak. And a large conversation that's happening again on one divide, which is the government's divide, is that, oh, there's nothing we can do about it because there's a war somewhere else in the world and our supply chain is disrupted. That's a valid reason for part of the rise in cost of living. That's not the entire reason. And then you have the other divide, in which speaks about the war has nothing to do with us. We should be giving all the money away to the people, and everybody should have this wonderful life, and promising all the things under the sun. And that again is ridiculous. So, because even themselves, when they were in power, were not doing that. So, you have the hypocrisy on both sides. And this is where we come and try to walk a balanced line down the middle. And what I'd like to first and foremost show is another factor of an average Guyanese in which why we are experiencing a rising in our cost of living. So many of our farms are run by small families or companies which are producing for the market or for their local area to sell. So let's say small to medium scale businesses. So I'm going to try and look at this from an objective perspective, where let's start determining a few new factors that nobody else is taking into consideration as to why and how our cost of living is rising. So tomatoes, for example, are locally produced and more than likely produced by a small to medium scale business, a family owned or a small company in which they have very limited, call it up to 10 employees, that they have their own small farms that they're producing for the markets or for their local area. Now, let's start with understanding the basic economics of starting a small or medium scale business. The first issue that we have here in Guyana is access to financing. And I like to use the example of something small like a car wash, in which understanding that if the right amount of money initially is not invested in the business is doomed to fail. So access to financing is always a large issue. So for example, if it costs $2 million to open a car wash and you only have 50% of that, let's say you're a very good businessman, you know how to cut corners, you know how to make things work, you're a hard worker. So you take your $1 million and say, you know what, I'm still going to open a car wash. I'm going to build the shed myself. I'm then going to, instead of buying a vacuum, I'm going to buy a broom and a brush. And instead of using a power washer, I'm going to use a hose. Well, because you've already started with half of the money, so your business now has half of the assets, you are now going to be washing your car or the cars, the customers that come to you, at half the rate, because you're taking more time sweeping, you're taking more time to wash the car, so you're initially already on the back foot. Your business is already going to struggle to make it. All right? So this has a lot to do with your initial investment. And when you see government programs now, as you see, up to $2 million, here come and collect $500,000, $500,000. The truth of the matter is, what kind of businesses are we even capable of opening on that kind of money? And we can argue that certainly not profitable businesses, most of which are doomed to fail because of the economics. They're not viable. So let's say you are a very fortunate and lucky person and your friend hits the lottery. You hit the lottery, or you find an investor. You then have found now enough money to open your little business, your little car wash. So you have the right tools, your vacuums, your detergents, your degreasers, your power washers, and your beautiful shed set up on the land that you're renting, so you have your overheads. Now, let's talk a little bit about actually running your business. You now have to pay either corporate and income tax, depending on if you're a sole proprietor, and those tax amount to about 40 to 50% of your income. You then have to take it from there to understand that you have to pay VAT on all your goods. All right? And then you have something that I like to look at as unpredictables. All right? You use basic business models like salaries and rent and electricity and water, and you use these basic samples of what should be your expenses. But in Guyana, we end up with a very real situation of many variables that you can't account for. So you have your car wash now. Your car wash is doing well. You're earning an income. All of a sudden, you're faced with so many different factors. For example, security, an issue that you should not have to face in any functioning society, in which you have to now hire a armed guard because customers are coming and paying you with cash in order to protect your business 7 days a week. And if you do any calculation from any company, an armed guard you're looking at for 7 days a week of work, you're looking at well over $500,000 Guyana dollars in an expense just to protect you and your money. Something that the police should be doing. Something that should not ever exist. Another good example of a variable that's unpredictable is, let's say you're using your power washer. Let's say you're very environmentally conscious. You decide to buy electric power washer or your vacuum. And then all of a sudden, GPL decides they're going to fluctuate your electricity. They're going to give you blackout all of a sudden because it's poorly managed. Another government's institution. And then your vacuum blows. Or your power washer, short circuits. All of a sudden, you are now faced at the initial stages of your business with expenses that you have never expected. So you now have to figure out a way to work around these costs. And what I like about doing business in Guyana and understanding the process is that you really don't have any control of it. And because of that, you end up in a position where you now have to use your personal income as a small and medium scale business owner to subsidize your business. So the business model that's usually used, where which should be used, where I pay myself a salary, no longer can work here because of the inconsistencies, because of how much it fluctuates on a monthly basis. So your income, your personal income as a business owner, is then directly related to the business and what the business earns. So now we're sitting in a position that you have to wonder to yourself, well, if my income directly is related to the income of my business, then when my expenses go up, the only way for me to supplement that is to raise the cost of my products. And this is what every farmer, every small to medium scale business owner, everyone has to do. Everyone that is producing their own income. So it really is an understanding of these are all small factors that are driving up the price. If that same farmer has to go and pay more money to put gas in his car, has to pay more money for meat at the butchery, has to pay more money to buy his children's exercise books, has to pay for those exercise books, more money in school fees, because everybody's dealing with the same problem, then guess what? Everything then naturally rises together. And this is a large part of understanding what a big problem here in Guyana is, and understanding where the government needs to start taking more action. Guyana is now at the stage where we are earning large sums of cash from our oil industry. I was recently doing a little bit of research, and I was looking at some other methods that are used around the world. And then funny enough, I saw somebody very recently on social media post it as well, where we were discussing what is a good and healthy way for money to slowly trickle in to our economy as to not create inflation or have any large detrimental economic impacts later on. And a very interesting theory that I'd like to share with you all was how some countries spend that income earned from oil. What they're doing, and to relate it a little bit more to Guyana, is if we pay about 50% of our income in taxes, then what can be done with our oil income is using 50% of that income to give to the government for infrastructure work and to help develop society, whether it be roads, school, infrastructure, security, health, what we are already paying taxes to sustain and develop. Then take the other 50%, put 10% into savings, 20% into investments, and then the other 20% can be used with incentive programs to be put back into the pockets of the citizens. Again, this is our oil. This oil does not belong to the government of Guyana. This oil belongs to the citizens of Guyana. And if you just take 20% of that income and put it into entrepreneurship programs, for example, and give people that seed money in grants or to facilitate loans, because a large part of another economic look is helping small and medium scale people, business people, to help with debt management and debt financing. So if you can get more money into these people's pockets to make their businesses more economically viable, then they will then be able to earn a better income and thus sustain themselves in a more sustainable way, in a more less impactful way into our economy in the long term. Again, avoiding inflation and other detrimental economic issues. On that note, again, I'd like to thank you all for joining us this evening. We had a wonderful program. I think a lot of our technical glitches were resolved from our last program, and we would like to make sure that you put in our comments section anything you'd like to ask us or any topics you think we should cover, because we're always looking for new and topical content. So make sure you please reach out to us. Our contact information is all here. And let us know what you think we should be covering on our next episode of Apolitically Incorrect here in Guyana. My name is Kian Jabour, and thank you for joining us.